guys, and welcome back to the channel. Today is going to be a pretty interesting redesign that we're going to focus on today. And as you know from the thumbnail, it's going to be the new Aventador, or it's not going to be called the Aventador, but the next generation Aventador. Now, I made a video on this talking about this design. From what we can see from all the camo here, it's going to be a naturally aspirated V12. It's going to have four-wheel drive, four-wheel steering. It's going to be a hybrid with over 800 horsepower, and it's going to have some active aero bits both front and rear. So needless to say, guys, this is going to be a pretty beastly machine. It is, after all, a V12 big brother Lamborghini. So what I'm going to do today is I got a lot of DMs asking me to make a render of this design, and honestly, I wasn't really planning on doing that. And then I thought, why am I not planning on doing this? And then it dawned on me that it was because I thought it was going to be too challenging from these photos to make a render out of it, and that got me pretty mad at myself, thinking, what am I thinking? If it's a challenge, of course I need to put in more effort and try to make this work. So I mean, that's what we're gonna do in this video. So I want to talk about these spy photos here with you and see what we can make out from the design in the front end, because it is a lot of wrap, and they have some good wrap here to cover the ups and downs and the creases of this design. These swirly things on the wrap really makes it really hard to see what the surfacing is actually like. So these are the three best front pictures I could find of this new prototype that they're testing. But we know that this is in fact the production body, so we can go from that at least. Now, looking at this, first let's have a look at this collage that I made for the second channel. I just want to quickly go over what I think is going to look like based on these spy photos. We have the Terzo Millennio, 100% electric. It has the clear Lamborghini DNA, as you can see in these lines right here. Then we have the Sián right here down below, also clear Lamborghini DNA, of course, with these lines, the silhouette that covers the entire roof from front to start. And then you have this center line right here that dips right where the A-pillar goes down, and then boom, shoots right back up. Typical Lamborghini DNA. And then we have some interesting graphics both in the front end of the Terzo Millennio, but also in the front end of the Sián. So I want to focus on this right here, because I think, honestly, I'm gonna make the redesign here, but I'm gonna base it on the spy photos. And when I look at the spy photos, when I compare it to the Sián, it looks almost identical. So I think, I'm pretty sure that the new Aventador, or the replacement for the current Aventador, is not gonna be named Aventador. It's gonna have some really cool name, I'm sure, but I think it's gonna be very, very similar to what the Sián looks like. We do have a bunch of different designs, a different design in the hood right here. I'm gonna show you that in the spy photos as well. But when it comes to this part right here, this graphics in the front end, very, very similar to the production version next generation Aventador. I'm 99% sure about that. Now, when it comes to the proportions, it's not gonna have the proportions of the Terzo Millennio. This is way too futuristic for production version right now, even though it would be awesome to see something like this where you have the A-pillar stretching in front of the rear axle, when normally it ends somewhere around this point, which I showed you in the previous video as well on my second channel. You can go and check that out, where I discuss this design DNA of Lamborghini in more detail than I'm gonna do here. But you can see that the A-pillar stops a little bit further back here, similar to what we have on the prototype. So looking at the prototype, we can just quickly go through the rear end and show you that it looks insane. It looks almost like a mix between the Sián and the Huracan Evo with this rear end, in my opinion. I love the exhaust pipes out there, bazooka sticking out in between the taillights, making this diffuser massive at the bottom right here. Very cool. But what we're gonna focus on in this video is, of course, the front end. So let's jump in here. Let's see what we can make out of this these spy photos here. So what I'm gonna do when we get into the redesign is I'm gonna have to jump between the design and then go back to the spy photos. It's gonna jump between those pictures, and you're gonna see that I'm gonna go back to this to kind of get some reference specifically in this design right here, which I want to talk more about. Let's start with this, because I'm gonna have it in a slight front view when I redesign. I'm gonna base it on the Sián, and that means that we're gonna have some air intake in the picture as well. What I think about this air intake is it looks a lot like the air intake that we have on the Terzo Millennio. The style, you can see that it zigzags like that. If we go back to the Terzo Millennio up here, you can see that it kind of zigzags here as well. We have the same kind of feeling in this air intake like we have on the prototype right here. Zigzag, same pattern. What I think about this is, at the moment, from what I'm looking at right now, it doesn't really look that dynamic to me, and I'm not sure I'm a fan of what it looks like right now, but at the same time, I'm pretty sure it's gonna look sick once the production version actually comes out. But what I think is a little bit weird with these intakes is that it's a duplicate of each other. So you have the same kind of intake here, and then the same kind of intake here in a vertical line. That creates neither movement this way or no movement this way either, more of a movement up and down, and it creates a very static design. But as I said, I'm not gonna try to redesign this. I'm gonna take what they have here, what we have in these photos, and try to make it look as real as possible based on what we can see right here. So even though I'm not a huge fan of this design of what it looks like, it's still something that I'm gonna try to render in the design that I'm gonna do here. Looking at the front view, you can see that it looks like the Sián front view. We have a clearly defined Lamborghini front end right here with these wings and winglets going down here. Typical Lamborghini with a massive intake somewhere in the corner, in the lower part of the corners. But what I'm confused about here is whether the light bar, the Y shape of the light, if it stretches all the way here, and then these two angles right here are the light bar, or if placement of it is further out to the side, because we have two different options we can go here with. This is option number one. The second option is here, and then the light bars go out here. So we have either this option number two or option number A, as you can see right here. And it's very hard to see from these camo pictures which one is the correct one. What we can make out of this is where the headlights are. The headlights are gonna sit right here, and I feel like they sit a little lower than they do on the Sián. The Sián sits a little far up here in relation to the height of the wheel, almost at the top of the rim, as you can see. And looking at the spy photos, it feels, at least in my opinion, that it sits a little lower than at the top up here. So we're gonna move down the headlights, for example, a detail that we're gonna have to change. The greenhouse reminds me a lot of the Huracan. So with that said, let's just jump in here and continue in Photoshop. Let's just try to figure out what the new next generation Aventador is going to look like. I'm really happy that Lamborghini is going forward with this project, because it feels like this is an ancient machine, even though it hasn't been introduced yet, with its naturally aspirated V12 putting out over 800 horsepower. But they decided to throw in a little bit of electric motor there to make it more legit in today's world, I guess. But I'm assuming that this is probably going to be the best mix between an electric motor and a naturally aspirated or internal combustion engine, because electric motors are not all that bad. They have a huge benefit, especially from launch. So 0 to 10 miles per hour, something like that. You have this instant torque, and I think that could be very beneficial to this car, specifically since it has all-wheel drive and all-wheel steering. So you have all that traction and you have all that power. So how do you get it down in the most efficient way? And that's where I think the electric motor is actually going to help this launch off the line a lot quicker than what we've seen before. It's not going to be the same 6.5 liter V12 that we have in the Aventador today. This is going to be a smaller displacement, and that is of course to reduce emissions and meet regulation standards. We were also expecting an update of the Urus Evo next year, so this is set to launch in 2023. Maybe at the end of this year we're gonna see some more spy photos of the actual car without the camo. That will be really cool, but I'm looking forward to the official release of this and all the spec and tech that they're gonna go that's gonna go with this new beast of a Lamborghini. And there will also be a new baby hybrid Lamborghini following the Huracan in 2024, and Lamborghini is also actually working on a fully electric Lamborghini for 2027. If it's gonna look like the Terzo Millennio, that would be fantastic, even though I don't think they're gonna go that crazy with the design. But still, it's 5 years ahead in time. And if we look back 5 years and look to what we have, what kind of cars we have today, for example, the EV6 and these very futuristic cars, the Lotus Evija and cars like that, it's not impossible to see something very close to the Terzo Millennio in production by 2027. And if that happens, I'm gonna be super happy because it looks like a Lamborghini while still being all electric. What's really gonna be interesting to see when the time comes to release the all electric Lamborghini is what are they gonna do with the sound, because the sound is such a huge part of the experience of not only driving a Lamborghini but also seeing it. So how are they going to solve that? It's going to be interesting to see what type of solutions are you come up with to still kind of have the same feeling and experience and excitement when driving a Lamborghini when the internal combustion engine is gone. I've said this before, I think there is a middle ground that we can still use internal combustion engines. A Lamborghini is one of these brands that I think should always be able to have an internal combustion engine in some of their cars. There are research being done right now. I might make a video on that on my second channel, where big companies and car manufacturers are actually researching and figuring out that if you produce the gas in a specific way, it can actually be almost greener than an EV in the long run, up to 40,000 miles or so, which is really interesting. Because when you think about it, producing all the batteries and producing the electricity, that requires a lot of energy too, and that energy isn't always as green as EV manufacturers make it out to be. So hopefully there is still a future for the internal combustion engine, specifically for cars like this. As I've said before as well, I don't really care about daily drivers. You can make them all electric. I loved my Tesla Model 3. It was a fantastic daily driver and I had a lot of fun with it. And it works fantastic for your daily commute. But for specific cars, hypercars, and cars that needs this extra punch to the experience, I think V12s and Lamborghinis like this should still be able to have an internal combustion engine. But that's just my opinion. Now let's talk about this design. What's going on here? So the funny thing here is, I took this Sián picture and then almost 20-25 minutes in, I realized like, oh crap, this is actually the Roadster version. So I had to figure out how to actually design the Roadster parts of this and integrate that with the new air intake that we're gonna do on the side. What I really think is cool about this as well is, if you look at the spy photos, it looks like they're gonna bring back some fins in the air intake, some very 80s styling, and I hope they do that because I think it looks really cool. And it's also a throwback to the 80s Countach, so if they put something like that on there, which it looks like they will based from the spy photos, it's gonna look really cool, and I'm gonna implement those here in the rendering as well. So it was really fun and challenging to make this Roadster Sián intake work with this new, completely new side that I'm gonna design here in this video. So it was even more challenging than I expected it to be. Looking at the hood, I think that's where a lot of change is gonna happen. And looking at the spy photos, there's a lot going on in the hood. You can see that there are two intakes or outlets probably up top, close to the windshield, that needs to be integrated, and those are also surrounded by a lot of different chamfers, but we still have the same kind of Lamborghini DNA where you have the two lines going down from the windshield and then becoming wider the lower they go down on the hood, all the way down to the daytime running lights. Usually when you look at the regular cars, most cars have those two lines be thinner or closer to each other the further down to the headlights, and then the higher up you go on the hood, the wider they become, and they can create some cool line flow in the hood. But Lamborghini has always done this in the opposite way, and that is one of the key features of the graphics of the front end of the Lamborghini. And that is also something that you can clearly see is implemented here in this design just by looking at the spy photos. I'm gonna take the daytime running lights. I'm 99.9% sure they're gonna use a Y shape of this design. I've made a couple of redesigns of this on this channel before for Lamborghini. For example, I did the Urus redesign, and I made an Aventador 2.0. I think it was almost 2 or 3 years ago here on the channel, and I'm gonna show that right here so you can see what that looked like. But this is gonna be a lot more detail in it. And also one thing that you can notice on the spy photos is that the wings that sit below the headlights, they stick a lot further in than they do on the Sián. The Sián have them sticking up, going up to the hood a lot sooner. Here they almost meet in the middle, and it looks like it has some sort of fin in the middle part as well, between the two intakes in the front end. That's something that I'm adding here as well. This was, as I said, a huge challenge to redesign. It might not look like a lot of changes here, but it was one of these redesigns that took a lot longer than I expected it to, because everything needs to fit with everything else. So all the graphic features, they need to connect with everything, and then specifically working on that side intake was very challenging, because you want to have the key lines of Lamborghini. They have almost like a triangle over the rear axle looking at it from a side view. That needs to be implemented here, and those lines by themselves need to be integrated in some other lines that we create in the side view. So everything has to have a connection here, and I think this looks pretty cool and pretty much as close as I can get to what the new Aventador will look like from these spy photos. It's probably gonna be a lot of changes when we see it come out in real life, but looking at the spy photos, I'm pretty sure it's gonna be close to what this looks like, and a lot of it is gonna be based on the Sián. I guess time will tell. If you want to learn how to sketch cars and products, you can check out my course down below in the description. If you want to pick up some cool merch and support the channel, you can do that down below as well. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.